Hi everyone and welcome along. Today we're going to paint a beautiful pink flower called the Bougainvillea, which is easy to say. I hope I've pronounced that right. Anyway, grab your paints and let's get started. Right, so we're going to do a Bougainvillea and I'm going to begin by sort of drawing a curved stem and then just popping a few branches off it. We often see a Bougainvillea much more as a sort of further away plant with sort of climbing up a wall in a terrace in a hot sunny courtyard in Spain or something like that, and you see it as a sort of lots and lots of tiny little flowers. So it was quite interesting to actually discover what the flower looks like close up. So it's got these rather interesting petals. I've got a size 8 brush here and some rather sort of bright permanent rose, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint in a few petals just to show you. So point of the brush and then really squishing it down, and you can see there that even when you think you've got a lot of water on the brush, you still need a bit more. So just get those brush really nicely coated in the colour in your palette, and I am going to just start to fill the page with very sort of fine tipped to broad bottomed petals, and if you need to just sort of add a little tip. Now I think this is a really good exercise actually in just describing how, if you sort of want to get smooth blends, if you've got a lot of water on your page, you can always pick some up off like that. And yeah, so I'm just going to paint in some petals. If you need 2 brush strokes, that's absolutely fine. I'm going to pop a few sort of down the middle as well. So the colour I'm using with permanent rose, I've got it to a point where it's quite bright, quite sort of strong, but it's still dilute-ish, because we are going to be layering up some more petals on top of it. So we want definitely to get a sense of sort of translucence of it. So if you need a few brush strokes like that just to get the petals working, or if you want to be using a slightly smaller brush just for the sake of more control, then that's absolutely fine as well. Okay, so I think that is enough for our first layer of petals. We're just going to let those dry and move on to the next stage. Okay, so our petals are dry. I'm now going to go down a few sizes to, I'm just going to sort of play around with a size 2 brush, I think, so I want a bit more control for these next petals. So getting the paint nicely mixed up, getting lots of water in the palette there, getting the bristles really nicely coated, and I'm just sort of dabbing the excess off on the edge of the palette. Okay, so a Bougainvillea has these sort of 3 petals that flick out, so you can see the point there and the point there. And they sort of, yeah, come into a central point. Now I am going to take a little bit of Alizarin Crimson this time and just drop a little bit of it in to the 2 wet petals. So we'll try this again. So they're not always going to sort of have quite exactly the same look. I'm going to flick these ones out a bit further so we sort of see into the flower a little bit more. You might have one that sort of folds back quite a lot. And then one that's sort of quite thin like that. So it's all about sort of playing around with the shapes and thinking about how, when you see flowers growing on a bush, something like a camellia or a blossom on a tree, that there's rarely two flowers looking exactly the same, are there? So I've got this all painted in, and I've got it to the point where it's still a little bit damp, and now I'm introducing the rigger brush that I love. The long slender bristles mean it's really good for painting in long slender little stems. I've got Sap Green, a bit of burnt sienna, and then a mixture of the two. And what I'm going to do now is, whilst it's actually still damp, because I quite like the idea of possible bleed and blend, is I want to paint in stems, but also some extra little branches that we're going to have. Just look at how slender that is. So this brush is also now available in my Etsy store and on the website, amongst 3 other new brushes that I've introduced, because I love my Pro Art brushes so much. And the Master Stroke range, they're the white handled ones that we use all the time, are brilliant. But then every now and then there's something that just you need a more specific brush for, and this is a classic example of that. Just look at how wonderful these long slender lines are and how easy it is to control, actually. Anyway, so yeah, I'm just painting in these stems, and then the main stem is going to get a bit thicker as we come down. Okay, I think that's, yeah, that looks good. And then get a little size 2 brush, and I'm going to place in some Sap Green leaves. So I'm just adding in a little bit of French Ultramarine blue, just at the base there, just dabbing it in. So now I'm going to sort of do a slight sort of balancing act of placing in leaves in and amongst the bougainvillea here. I mean, now you would want your flowers to be dry before adding in your leaves, because you don't want to bleed. But this is looking really nice. So yeah, we're just going to find the gaps, and if you want to add in 1 or 2 that maybe don't have an obvious branch just yet, that's absolutely fine, because you can then add in a little branch extra. And if you just sort of want to wait for things to calm down a little bit, you can just paint in the stem a little bit more. So I just went back to that brown green mix, and maybe, whoops a daisy, gosh, that's dramatic. I've never done that before. Monday morning, I film on Monday mornings, and I think I need another coffee. There we go. Oh, a bit of drama and excitement for you. So just sort of creating a few little sepals on the branches, and then towards the base I'm going to have some larger leaves, so I thought I'd get my size 8 brush back. And the leaves become just a little bit curlier as they get bigger. So I'm just smoothing that. Sometimes with mixed media brushes, that's the only thing, is you do sometimes get a bit of an uneven bleed just because of how they hold water. I do actually have quite a few little videos all about that very subject of trying to achieve perfect blends in my flowers and foliage playlist, and also in my quick fix videos as well. There is a lot to be found, a lot of extra content whenever you need it. One of my favourite things about painting leaves is really sort of embracing those slightly more raw organic edges though, and not making them too perfect, but just adding in that little bit of darker blue just really helps. Now if you want to paint in a leaf or two that you want to sort of get just underneath the flowers, then you can take a smaller brush. This is a size 2/10. Maybe don't even have to go so small, we could take a 0. Just make sure it's nice and wet and got a nice fine point. And you could just paint in behind. You just got to make sure that whatever you're painting right up next to is dry. So this look is looking nice and full now. So now we can have a think about some of the detail. In the centre of a bougainvillea flower is a sort of bright whitish green stamen, which we're going to add by using a bit of acrylic, or you could use gouache. But now what I'm doing is I'm just mixing up a bit of Alizarin Crimson and permanent rose, because the other thing that you have in a bougainvillea flower is just a little bit of they're almost like leaves, and in fact I wonder if one of you is going to tell me that these are in fact leaves, not petals. So I'm going to just send the rigger brush up the middle of some of these. And create some little bit of leaf detail. Anyone who's watched for long on my channel will know that leaf detail used to be something I really didn't like doing much of. But I must say, these days, with a rigger brush in particular, it just makes it really easy. So you don't need to do it on every single one. I know this is the kind of bit that sends people a bit nervous. But just make sure that your central line up the petal just follows the curve of that petal. And then you can just send a few curves off the side. And of course, you can also do this with the leaves too. The green leaves, that is, if we are going to be calling these Bougainvillea petals actually leaves. I'd love to know any of you have experience with this plant. I've only ever seen it in sort of Spain, Italy, and sort of hot countries. But do let me know if you have one growing. I guess we painted wisteria a little while back, didn't we? This is the hot country wisteria equivalent. Okay, let's do a few leaf lines so we can get. It's not the greatest for mixing with that brush. get your bigger brushes for mixing up your paints. So we've got a bit of French ultramarine, and I'm just gonna stick it in with the leaf mixes here, just to darken that all down a bit. Make sure my rigger isn't pink. And you could just send a little dark line up the middle. Of course, we have got the nice little bit of unpainted space on the leaf, which helps give it a little bit of shine. But if you also find that you painted over leaves over the top of the pink and they aren't quite sort of covering it over enough as you'd like, then you could always just add just a little bit of slightly more concentrated colour. And you don't have to do it on just the ones that are trying to cover over. It can just be a really nice extra little detail. And it can give a sense that the leaf is quite shiny. You're not having to sort of blend it, you're just putting in a bit of light and shade. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so now I'm going to mix up a little bit of I'm going to use white acrylic today. Sometimes I use gouache, sometimes use acrylic, but this stuff you can link in the episode notes to where I got it. I got it mine from Jackson's Art, and I'm going to get some clean water and I'm going to mix up a bit of green gold in with it. But you can see it's very different, it's much thicker. It still wants water. You can see if you mix it in with your watercolour. I don't encourage you to do that generally. I'm going to be cleaning my palette off after this, but you want to try and keep it separate. Okay, and whilst that just settles in, and you also want to clean, it takes a little bit longer to really clean your brush right off. The last thing we need is a stamen sort of shaft. So I'm going to get a bit of Alizarin Crimson and a bit of French Ultramarine Blue to make a lovely kind of plummy purpley colour. And my size 0 brush should just about be slender enough. I'm going to do 2 sort of flicks of the brush from the centre. And then we're going to add in our solid white flowers in the centre of the stamen. So I've made sure I've got a size 0 brush that's nice and clean, and I'm now, make sure it's wet though, going to pick up some of this more solid paint, and I'm going to paint a little sort of, it's basically like a little flower at the top of each stamen. So I'm just doing little blobby dots. So you can see why you need an opaque paint for this bit, because they really do stand out quite a lot. And then once you've painted that in, a little bit of a green centre. So I'll just take a little bit of the green gold and fill that in. And there you go. I've just been going around just doing like a tiny little bit of last little bits of detail here and there with the Alizarin Crimson, but on the whole I'm really pleased with that. So there you have your bougainvillea close up. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that one. I want to say a massive thank you to my patrons for their support, because that support enables us to keep creating videos like these that everyone can enjoy. And of course, if you've enjoyed it, then hit the like button and comment below to let me know how you got on with that one. And if you never want to miss another video, then hit the subscribe button and the little notification bell and you'll never miss us again. Okay, bye!